There was once a woman who carried a quiet pain, an invisible wound that refused to heal. For 12 long years, she woke up each day to the same reminder that her body was broken, that something inside her just wouldn't stop bleeding. What began as a small illness became a lifetime of suffering. Over time, it stole her strength, her peace, and little by little, her place in the world. She lived in a small town, where everyone knew and visited each other. Once, she had been part of that rhythm, visiting neighbors, laughing at the market, sharing meals with family. But when her sickness began, all that changed. According to the customs of the time, a woman in her condition was seen as unclean. It wasn't her fault, yet the law declared that anyone who touched her, or anything she touched, would be unclean too. At first, she didn't believe it would last. She thought it was just a passing illness, something that would heal after a few weeks. She told herself she'd be back to normal soon, back to family gatherings, back to worship, back to life. But days became months, and months became years. And instead of healing, things only grew worse. She tried everything. Every remedy the healers suggested, every herb and oil people recommended. She traveled to nearby villages, paying doctors who promised cures. One gave her a strange mixture to drink, another told her to rest for 7 days and pray over certain words. Each time, she held on to a sliver of hope. Each time, it slipped through her fingers. As the years passed, her savings disappeared. Her body weakened. Her friends stopped visiting, not out of cruelty but out of fear. Even her own family, though they loved her, had to keep their distance. The rules were strict: she couldn't sit where others sat, couldn't prepare food, couldn't enter the place of worship. Everything she touched became unclean. And so she withdrew, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. Days turned into long, silent hours. She would sit by the window, watching people pass by, children laughing, merchants shouting prices, mothers carrying baskets of bread. Sometimes she smiled, remembering when that was her life. Other times, she turned away, because the memories hurt too much. 12 years is a long time to wait for change. It's long enough to wear down even the strongest faith. And yet, something inside her refused to die completely. A spark, small but alive, remained in her heart. Every morning, when she opened her eyes, that spark whispered, "Try again." Some days she hated that whisper. She was tired of disappointment. But she couldn't silence it. It was as if something deep within her still believed that her story wasn't over yet. There were nights when she cried silently, afraid that even God had forgotten her. "Why me?" she would whisper. "Why must I carry this forever?" But even in her tears, she found herself speaking to God, not out of anger, but longing. If he was real, if he truly saw her, then maybe, somehow, someday, he would send help. One morning, she heard a sound from the street outside her small home. A voice, excited and breathless, saying, "He's coming." At first, she thought it was just talk about a traveler or a merchant. But the words that followed made her sit up. The healer. The teacher from Nazareth, Jesus, they say he's nearby. The name had already spread through the towns. People said he was a man like no other. That blind eyes opened when he spoke. That paralyzed men walked again. That he even touched lepers, people everyone else avoided, and they were healed. At first, she didn't believe it. It sounded too good to be true, too impossible. But as she listened to people talking outside, she heard something in their voices, something she hadn't heard in a long time: hope. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking of all the stories she had heard. If it was true, if this Jesus really healed people, then maybe, just maybe, he could heal her too. But then fear crept in. What if he doesn't? What if I'm too broken? What if he won't even let me near him because of who I am? She turned over in bed, staring into the darkness. You've tried everything, she told herself. But what if this time is different? The next morning, she decided. She would go. Her body ached. Her hands trembled as she tied the edge of her shawl. She had no idea where she would find him, but she knew he was nearby. Outside, the streets were alive with movement, crowds pressing together, people calling out his name. She hesitated for a moment, standing in the doorway. Her heart pounded. For 12 years, she had stayed hidden, careful not to touch anyone. And now she was about to walk into a crowd. She could almost hear the voices of her past, neighbors who had whispered behind her back, relatives who had stepped away from her. Don't go near her. Don't touch her. But that spark in her heart, the one that had refused to die, was burning stronger now. She took a deep breath and stepped outside. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she kept walking. People brushed past her, focused on the man at the center of the crowd. She could see him up ahead, Jesus. He wasn't surrounded by guards or soldiers. He was just walking, talking, smiling at people. There was something calm about him, something peaceful. Her eyes filled with tears as she watched. That's him. She moved closer, trying not to be noticed. Every bump, every touch from the crowd made her flinch, afraid someone would recognize her. But her focus stayed on Jesus. She whispered to herself, if I can just touch his clothes, that's all I need. I don't need him to stop or speak to me. Just one touch. Her heart raced. She could almost feel the moment coming, the one she had dreamed of for years. She pressed forward through the sea of people, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Voices rose all around, men calling for Jesus, women pleading for blessings. Children laughing as they tried to see over the crowd. Dust swirled around their feet. The air was thick with heat and excitement. But to her, every step was a battle. Her body was weak, trembling from years of pain and hunger. Each bump from the crowd made her wince, each shout felt like thunder in her fragile chest. Still, she kept going. Just a little closer, she whispered to herself. People pushed past her, not noticing the small figure slipping between them. She could see Jesus now, his robe, the outline of his shoulders, the calm strength in his stride. Something about his presence stilled the noise in her mind. For the first time in years, her fear began to fade. She thought back to the mornings when she could barely rise from her bed, to the long nights when she had cried alone, begging God to notice her. And now, here she was, so close to the one everyone said could make the impossible possible. Her eyes locked on the edge of his robe. That's all she needed. One touch. Just one. Her hand trembled as she reached forward. The crowd surged again, nearly knocking her down, but she steadied herself, stretching out her fingers through the sea of legs and robes. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the cloth, just a whisper of contact. And then, something changed. A warmth shot through her body, quick and pure. It wasn't like anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was life. The bleeding stopped. Her strength returned in an instant. The ache in her bones disappeared. For a moment, the world around her seemed to fade away. All she could hear was her own breath, shaky and astonished. Tears filled her eyes. After 12 long years of misery, the pain was gone. Completely gone. She stood frozen, her hands still trembling. She looked at her palm as if expecting to see proof of what had just happened. There was nothing to see, just the quiet, overwhelming certainty inside her that she was whole again. Her knees nearly gave way as she sank to the ground, whispering, "Thank you, oh, thank you," but then the noise around her shifted. Jesus had stopped walking. The crowd, still buzzing moments ago, fell into a confused silence. He turned slowly and looked around. "Who touched me?" he asked. The people exchanged glances. Some laughed nervously. One of his disciples, bewildered, said, "Master, the crowd is pressing all around you. Everyone's touching you." But Jesus shook his head gently. "No," he said. "Someone touched me. I felt power go out from me." The woman's breath caught in her throat. Her heart raced again, this time with fear. She knew he was talking about her. She knew that in the eyes of the law, she had broken every rule by coming there. She had touched people, touched him. What if he was angry? What if she had done wrong? She tried to shrink back, but the crowd was staring, whispering. Everyone wanted to know who had caused Jesus to stop. And deep inside, she knew she couldn't hide. Not from him. She took a trembling breath, pushed herself up, and stepped forward. Her legs felt weak again, but not from illness, from awe. I touched you," she said softly, her voice barely audible. The people turned to look at her, eyes widening as they recognized her face, the woman who had been unclean for years. She fell to her knees before him. Words spilled out through her tears. She told him everything, how long she had suffered, how much she had lost, how she had believed that just one touch could heal her. The crowd listened in silence. Some looked at her in pity. Others in disbelief. But Jesus didn't move away. He didn't scold her. He just looked at her. And in that look was something she hadn't felt in years: acceptance. Understanding. Love. Then he spoke, his voice calm and kind, yet strong enough for everyone to hear. "Daughter," he said. She gasped. It had been so long since anyone had called her by a name that meant belonging. "Daughter. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be free from your suffering." The words washed over her like cool water on a burning day. She closed her eyes, letting them sink deep into her heart. He hadn't just healed her body. He had given her a new identity. He had called her daughter. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the faces of the crowd. They were no longer looking at her with judgment, but with wonder. Some smiled through their tears. Others whispered prayers under their breath. She rose slowly, feeling the strength in her legs, the kind of strength she had almost forgotten existed. The sunlight seemed brighter, the air fresher. Everything felt new. Jesus turned back to continue his journey, surrounded by his disciples, but before he walked away, he gave her one last glance, a look that said more than words ever could. She didn't need to say anything. He already knew. That night, as the town grew quiet and the stars filled the sky, the woman sat outside her home and looked up, her heart overflowing with peace. For the first time in 12 years, she felt whole, body, mind, and soul. She touched her hands to her heart and smiled through her tears. He saw me, she thought. After all this time, he saw me. All the years of shame, the whispers, the loneliness, none of it defined her anymore. She had walked through the darkest valley and found light again. She thought about the moment he called her daughter. That single word had changed everything. It reminded her that she wasn't forgotten, that she had always belonged to someone greater. As dawn broke, she stepped outside into the gentle glow of morning. The world looked different now, not because the streets had changed, but because she had. People who once avoided her now greeted her with astonished joy. A neighbor she hadn't spoken to in years rushed to embrace her. The woman hesitated for a second, then smiled and returned the hug. For the first time in more than a decade. She didn't have to worry about being unclean. Her laughter echoed down the narrow road, pure and free. But beyond her personal joy, something deeper lingered in her heart, a quiet understanding of what faith truly means. Faith isn't about certainty, it's about holding on even when nothing makes sense. It's about believing when every voice tells you to give up. Her story became a testimony that spread from one home to another. People spoke about the woman who was healed by a single touch. But she knew it wasn't the touch itself, it was the faith behind it. It was the courage to reach out, even when fear said to stay hidden. Years later, she would tell the story to others who were struggling, men and women who felt forgotten, who believed their situation could never change. She would smile gently and say, "There was a time I thought my life was over too. But then I reached out for hope, and hope reached back." Sometimes she would pause, remembering the sound of his voice, soft but steady, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Every time she recalled those words, she felt them anew, like sunlight warming her soul. And that's what she carried for the rest of her days, not just healing, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from being seen and loved completely. This story is not just about a woman who was healed. It's about what happens when faith refuses to quit. It's about believing when life gives you every reason not to. We all have moments when we feel unseen, when we carry battles no one else understands. We've all faced seasons where it seems like God is silent and the pain will never end. But this woman's story reminds us that hope is never wasted. Sometimes, it takes years of waiting. Sometimes, it takes a single step of courage. But no matter how dark things seem, faith can still reach out, and touch the impossible. Maybe you've been waiting for your own miracle. Maybe you've prayed for something so long that you've stopped expecting an answer. But just like that woman, your story isn't over yet. The same compassion that healed her still reaches for you. The same voice that called her daughter still whispers your name. So don't give up. Don't let fear tell you your situation is too far gone. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, even if all you can do is whisper, I believe. Because sometimes, all it takes is one small act of faith, one simple touch, to change everything.